All right. I'd like to welcome everyone to the October 2022 City of Columbia Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. I'm Gene Dinkins Jr., Chair of the Board. At this time, I'd like to introduce the other members of the board. We've got Marcellus Primus to my left, followed by Catherine Finner. What's your name again? John Gregory.
John, just say John.
John and Celia McIntosh. Okay, I'd also like to introduce the staff that assists the board. We've got Hope Hasty, Zoning Administrator, Erica Hyen, Deputy Zoning Administrator, and Sky Robinson Barnes. The board is charged with hearing applications for special exceptions, variances, and administrative appeals. All testimony is recorded for the record, and anyone wishing to speak will need to be sworn in and come to the podium to speak. No testimony can be taken from the floor. When you come to the podium, state your name and please speak clearly into the microphone because this meeting is being recorded. Applicants with cases before the board are allotted a presentation time of 10 minutes. This time does not include any questions asked by the board or staff regarding the case. Any member of the public may address the board in intervals of 3 minutes or 5 minutes if by a spokesperson for an established body or group of 3 or more. The applicant then has 5 minutes for rebuttal. The board reserves the right to amend these procedures on a case-by-case basis. Okay, so those of you who plan to speak must be sworn. If you are here as an applicant or to speak in any case, please stand at this time and raise your right hand. Okay, do you affirm or attest that the testimony you will give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Okay, thank you. All right, so at this time, we'd like to turn the meeting over to staff.
All right, good afternoon. We'll start out with the consent agenda, which starts with the approval of the September 1st, 2022 minutes. Next item on consent agenda is 2022-0031 SE. It's Broadway, Flora, and Poe Streets, special exception request to permit an alternative parking surface. And the next item on the consent agenda is 2022-0032 SE, the 50 block of National Guard Road. It's also a special exception request to permit an alternative parking surface. And that concludes the consent agenda. At this time, would anyone like to remove a case from the consent agenda?
Well, yeah, for the record, I've submitted a letter of refusal because Cox and Bacon is the civil engineer for both of these projects.
No, there was an email that was submitted. It was included in your packets.
Okay. Are we giving anybody a chance to call in or no?
No,
Okay.
not anymore.
All right. Well, do we want to make a motion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda subject to staff comments.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Very good.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the regular agenda. We've got case 2022-0033V. It's 1800 block of Pulaski Street, and it's a variance request to the minimum required neighborhood compatibility standards, which is a new section in the new Unified Development Ordinance that was adopted last August, or August of 21. And the applicant is here to present the request.
Okay.
James Kaiser with the Wilson Company. This property is on the 1800 block of Pulaski Street. There There's 4 lots that we are looking to combine these into one lot and build 2 duplexes on here. Per community standards, the driveway cannot be closer than 15 feet to a protected lot, which we are surrounded by a protected lot on both sides. The width of the property at the street is only 22 foot 2 inches. The zoning is MU2, which is mainly for townhomes. Everything around this property is townhomes, except for these 2 protected lots. One's been there since 1900, the other was recently moved there. It's under construction, nothing is being done to it. It just sits vacant. The other variance we're asking for is for 1 extra parking space to get a total of 10 parking spaces. With community standards, it's 1.1, the minimum, and so we would ask him for 1 more parking space.
You need to,
I'm sorry. So we're asking for 1 more parking space. Included in the packet is a bunch of pictures of everything surrounding it. Everything on that street is townhomes. There's Columbia Public Housing. To the right of it, to the left of it is a neighborhood of townhomes. Across the street is townhomes. That's the 1900 house, and that's the house under construction. Our property would be in between those two, so we only have 22 feet to fit a driveway in there. Along with this, we would, for transitional buffers, we would be required to put a fence up and trees to hide it so that you won't see most of the parking from the street. The house will be set back, the 2 duplexes will be set back on the property, so you really will not see much of that either from Pulaski Street.
Hope, can we, okay, perfect, thank you.
That's the other adjacent townhomes. It's a neighborhood, I believe, about 20, 25 townhomes adjacent to this property. And that's across the street, again, townhomes along that street as well. So we are looking to do what the zoning requires or allows in this area. The only holdback is the 2 single families that are out of place for this area. Thank you.
Well, hang on a second, James. Yeah. Let's see, we have a question. So I must say, I read this twice when I first read it. I didn't know you had to ask for a variance for an increased parking spaces. We're commonly have this the other way. So that was new to me. So that's,
Yeah.
really, I said, how can that be? But certainly an unusual configuration. So you haven't had any contact, either positive or negative, with these adjacent residential structures or owners or
No, I have not.
anything?
No, sir.
Interesting.
I have questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. If we could go back to, or Erica, whoever's running the show, go back to the slide that shows the access line. There, right there. That's a good one. Now, I'm seeing, so your property is between those 2 properties, and if I read the survey plat correctly, the driveway, the little loose gravel driveway of the house to the, I guess, the left of this picture, south of the property, is slightly encroaching on your thing, but there's a line of power wire going down there. What's
Yeah.
going on with that?
So there is we've talked to Dominion, that is just a service line to those 2 structures, and they have already agreed to move that pole to a new location to service those 2 houses and our new houses.
Okay. All right. Now, when I looked at the plat, there's an alleyway that's not opened that I think runs runs to the south of that, the house, the greenhouse on the left. And, yeah. And it says it's an unopened alleyway. Do you own any other property around in the area, or?
Our client owns the property. Behind it, it's that vacant lot. I can't see the tax map number, but it's the long skinny one across
Okay.
from the alleyway right behind our blue highlights.
Okay,
He owns that, but because of the alleyway, we can't combine it with this lot, these other 4 lots. So it's just a separate property that's going to have its own parcel number and everything.
okay, so, I'm sorry, so there's the alleyway that is to the to the west of it, and then you own that little notch. Is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about the property above that?
No, ma'am, it's, I'm trying to find the tax map number. The tax map number ends in 07. It's to the left.
To the left, so
Yes, ma'am.
right along the edge of the alley, but on the southern line, continues to the southern line.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So is there some reason why you couldn't have just a 10-foot wide driveway coming in from Pulaski Street and then exiting out onto Morris Alley?
The alleyway is not usable. It's overgrown. There's no access to the actual street on Richland Street.
Well, that could be fixed, couldn't it? I mean, it's public property. It's not, it's still public, right?
I believe with our conversations with city staff that it wasn't going to be usable, I believe.
I mean, you're not leaving much room at all for those houses on either side.
The minimum width for the 2-lane driveway was 21 feet, so that's where we got our dimension on the driveway from.
Okay. 21 feet, and you've got 22.2,
Yes, ma'am.
so you could do it.
We could, but our variance is not for the width of the actual driveway, it's for the location of it, being within 15 feet of a protected lot.
I see, okay.
There's
But
just-
if you, I guess what I'm thinking is that if you were able to access Morris Alley, so you'd have come in one way and come out the other, you'd have good circulation, and also you'd be able to have some buffer for those houses, instead of just an ugly fence, just a basic fence.
Even with a 10-foot driveway, we wouldn't meet the minimum of 15 feet away from a protected lot.
But it would be less, it'd be a kinder, gentler way to do things, and you'd be able to provide some vegetation. That's where I'm kind of coming from.
You would have vegetation, but because of our transitional buffers that we're required to do, we would still have an 8-foot fence along both property lines. So the vegetation would actually be inside of the fence
I
on
see,
our property.
I see.
So it would add no vegetation to the
Doesn't
other
help
side.
them at all.
It doesn't help them at all, no,
Okay.
ma'am.
All right.
Because we're required to have a transition buffer on both lots, on both sides of the property. And at the back left corner, there's a vacant lot. That little notch you were talking about is a vacant lot that could be eventually done as a single family, so we had to put a transitional buffer there as well. So we have three sets of transitional buffers.
But there's no access, no access at all to it, I guess,
There's not, but we're still
unless
required,
you open the alley.
yeah, we're still required to put a transitional
I
buffer
see,
there.
I see. Did you consider putting street parking? Just using the street parking?
I don't believe there was enough spots to make it viable to have street parking. We only have 20 feet in front of our actual property.
Well, looks like there's kind of a fair amount of parking
And
though.
the zoning ordinance does require that the parking, it has to be on your lot.
Right, but I'm thinking, instead of adding, I guess my thinking is, instead of adding an extra space, you could put green space, put a tree, something instead. I'm sorry, I've moved on to the parking piece. Moved on to the parking piece. Instead of adding a space, you could simply have, one of the people or whatever park on the street. Or maybe nobody would want to park, I don't know.
We could, yes.
Okay. All right.
I got a question for staff. Is the 8-foot fence, is that per the zoning ordinance, or Because we've gotten a lot of fence height variances.
So an 8-foot fence is allowed as part of a buffer yard.
Okay.
So-
Instead of the buffer, they do a taller fence?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But you're correct. The regular fence ordinance does have a 7-foot maximum height, but this is part of a buffer yard, so that's why it's allowed, the 8-foot
Okay.
is allowed.
Okay. Who are you, James, who are you guys, I'm familiar with the townhomes, Arsenal Hill and all that. Who are y'all targeting for occupying these units?
I believe it's going to be student housing.
Student, okay.
All right, going back to law school here and thinking about easements of necessity and so on, and you've got the problem of otherwise those lots are landlocked in the back. I guess you were not able to come to any kind of an agreement with the shotgun house owner, or
No, ma'am.
were you able to find them?
I'm sorry?
Were you able to find them? I mean,
No.
okay.
I mean, right now, all those lots are kind of landlocked as they are.
Well, the idea being that if you could acquire those two adjacent properties, then you do have a nice, nice square parcel.
There will be a heavy amount of landscaping on this project as well because of our transitional buffer. We have to have 52 2-inch caliber shade trees, and we also have to have at least 80 shrubs spaced out where we can on the transitional buffer. That's where the blue squares are on this property.
It looks like you're just kind of making a little tiny forest of,
Well,
I mean, it's tree.
For
I mean, it seems kind of silly. It's like could you not spread the trees out some?
we haven't done the full landscaping plan on it, but we do have to have them within the general area of where the transitional buffer has to go. We have to have that requirement of trees in there.
Celia, anything?
What, I just got a curious question. What's going on with the house that's not finished? I mean, is that,
It's been like that for, I think, a year or two. I think it got moved to the site
Yeah.
somewhere else, and there's the power pole, I don't think it's even hooked up. But I've never seen
Just
anybody on
not,
site.
yeah.
Nothing going on, as far back as we can go on, a couple of years on Google Maps, it looks exactly the same.
okay. It's bizarre.
Well, my deck got pancaked in June, and it's only just now gotten finished, so I have an idea that some of that problem may have to do with the shortage of construction labor.
Yeah. Probably, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? All right. Thank you, James.
Thank y'all.
Okay. Would any members of the public like to speak on this matter? Okay.
My name is Roy James. I'm actually the owner of that property at 1819, the one that's south of it, that's not finished right now.
Okay.
And I've ran into issues, like you said, with construction, with COVID. Having issues with getting the contractor out to get things finished up. So that's what I've been kind of battling. And then just with my full-time job, I haven't had time to get down there and get it done. So that is on our agenda to get done. But the first I had seen of it was the sign that was posted this week, and that's why I'm here to kind of get. So yeah, I'm interested in seeing the plans, and that's why I kind of stopped in here to kind of.
Wait, when you turn around, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I wanted to get the chance to see the plans and see what was, and actually I had a lot of the same questions y'all were asking, about how this is going to be laid out. So that's why I'm here. I would like to see the plans too of the fence and how that's going to look. And I guess the good thing with me not finishing my construction, I can match it up even more to what you're having as far as your property, Again, I worked closely with the city when I was getting mine planned, and I liked the idea of how we're trying to keep everything the same as, and the historical value of that neighborhood, right, and trying to maintain that. So that's what we were looking at doing. And I just wanted to kind of speak to that. And I can give everyone my contact number and contact email. It should be on file, but any way to contact them or follow up with you afterwards. So I know there's other people that want to speak as well, but that's why I wanted to bring it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Jerome Singleton. I actually own the property at 1823 Pulaski Street, the Shotgun House.
Okay, so that's the one on the other side?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Nobody's ever tried to contact me. I'm getting calls all the time, people asking about the place, but I haven't gotten any calls about this. But I learned about it by the sign being in the yard, just as everybody else. So I have an interest in just exactly what are they trying to do with it. The driveway that they're looking at coming through actually separates Mr. James' house and mine.
Right.
Just got some concerns about what it looks like. I mean, I don't know what ability I have to even stop it, but I'd at least like to know what it is and see what challenges it's going to create for me so I can bring it to your attention.
Okay. Well, when we speak with the applicant again, we'll ask him for a little more detail on his proposed driveway.
Thank you.
We'll ask him.
Thank you.
Okay?
Hey there, my name is Kristen Puckett, and I'm the president of the Arsenal Hill Neighborhood Association. This was just brought to my attention very recently, and while the neighborhood in general is in support of having some of these vacant lots developed, we had some real concerns that I guess I'll just lay out here. First is that if you look at the scale of the Shotgun House with an 8-foot fence directly by it, it's going to seem like a wall. And I understand the reasoning with the buffer, but in terms of highest and best use of this property, if it was being developed into 2 residences that didn't necessarily need a driveway that required an entrance and an exit, you could minimize the width of accessing that property and allow there to be a little bit of a buffer. The fact that it's going to be student housing, we've dealt with having a lot of student housing in our community. We love our community, it's diverse, but that brings us into whether or not they're going to have an HOA. Who's going to be responsible for maintaining an 8-foot fence? We all know here in South Carolina, the moisture and the humidity always makes wood suffer. So is anybody going to be on that maintenance, or after a couple of months or years, is it going to be warping and look disheveled? Trash, are they going to have a common area to dispose of trash? Are they going to put the trash bins out at the street? If so, there's not the width to put them in front of the property without blocking the driveway, or they're going to be in front of these other folks' properties. How is that going to be addressed? Again, like the neighborhood in general is supportive. It's just, it's a tricky piece of property to develop, and we want to make sure that our neighborhood continues to grow and thrive in the way that it has. And I feel like we're on a great trajectory. We work frequently with the folks at the Battery. They attend our little neighborhood association meetings. They have their own HOA. They were just made aware of this when I was made aware of this. In general, I do feel that, it would have been nice to have gotten reached out to have had some discussions about these things before they came to y'all, to directly ask for a variance, because, personally, regardless of whether a house is finished or a house is large or someone paid $800,000 for it or whatever, walking out of a property and having an 8-foot fence slapped against your property line is not something that any of us would want in our neighborhood. And we're setting a precedent that is going to allow this type of development. Again, we want these areas to be developed, but, it could also be a single-family residence tucked away back in there with a large yard, with a narrow driveway that's not going to have such, an impact on those two neighboring structures. And one thing I will say, the two single-family homes are actually very characteristic of this neighborhood. The townhomes are not characteristic. They were only built because during urban renewal, the city swept away large swaths of the historically African-American downtown to prepare for high-rises, which is actually what, before our zoning got changed recently, our neighborhood was zoned for high-rise development. I live across the way, around the corner on Wayne Street, and it's the potential uses of this neighborhood has certainly been changing. So, I just asked y'all to consider that, consider those points. And I mean, I know we're here, but it would be great to have the ability, before any decisions are made, to have an open discussion with the property owners and the developer to see if we could work something out with staff or something to where we could come to a good agreement for everybody,
Right.
because
Yeah, I understand.
they're in a tough spot, so,
Do remember that we do recommend that, but they're not required to do that. I mean, it's required to be posted, so,
right.
but I understand. Well,
Okay.
thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, hope you can hear me very well. My name's Mark Ruiz, and actually, I own 1813 Pulaski Street. And so I do see the owner of the Shotgun House all the time because when they're doing the maintenance. And I have seen the construction of the house that is still under construction for probably 3 years now. I've been in the property since 2016. That property is slightly over 2,000 square feet. Three stories, two-car garage, home value roughly $320,000. I personally have a household income of over $250,000. And I was a little concerned when I saw the sign posted, and there's been no really discussion. I actually just a few seconds ago figured out what is actually happening with the land. Mm-hmm. So very fragile neighborhood. You think about, you have public housing, but then you have, someone such as myself. The next door neighbor to me is the director of on-campus recruiting at the University of South Carolina for the football team. So very, the neighbors, it's a fragile neighborhood, and I think how it was designed and what it's bringing in today is kind of a positive to the neighborhood. And so really want you to consider the effects of those who actually live right there. And it's true, because I was thinking about that, an 8-foot wall. Now, there was a situation with the pandemic where my job was going to, they relocated me to North Carolina, but I didn't have to go. And so my house was on the market for probably 14 days. And several people looked at it, and they all had concerns about what was next door to me. So I could see that was starting to have an effect on the home value. So I'm just asking you, please consider this very seriously, because it's affecting real people in the neighborhood. Just because they haven't come and spoken to us about it. And to be honest, I'm not the type of person that's going to go out there and be like, what are you doing? And,
Right.
Stuff like that. I kind of trust in our county and county officials. And so I'm leaving it in your hands and appreciate you letting me hear me out.
Yeah.
Thank you for your testimony very much. Okay, is there anyone else who has not spoken who would like to speak on this matter? Okay, good. Well, would the applicant like a few minutes for rebuttal?
As to concerns on the fence, we would love not to do the fence and the buffer. It cost us $60,000 extra to do this fence and the buffer, so we would love to not have to do that.
That's a requirement.
That is a
from the city,
requirement
correct?
from the city because of the two single families beside it. We would love not to do that.
Understood? Yeah, understood. How about the driveway that one of the adjacent owners was curious about the configuration? Can you give any more details about that?
Yeah, the driveway would be a concrete driveway, like you typically see on a single-family residence house. So from the street, it would look like a single-family residence house.
Okay.
The actual structures themselves, we haven't finished design work on them yet, but we have to, it's not in a historical district, and, but it's in the OVCC, I believe, the overlay, I think. I can't remember the letters, but it is something that, yeah, so it does have to conform to the neighborhood on the looks of it. So we have been in talks with the city on that to get some preliminary floor elevations to them to approve the look of it. So it would match the area. It wouldn't be something that's
Basically,
off track.
a concrete driveway that would conform to city regulations, basically.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Or whatever that is, okay. About the disposal of the trash or dumpster area, or I think that was a really good question someone brought up. I hadn't thought of that.
Our original plan, or our plan would be to, like we've done on other properties, we have the carts that they wheel out to the road.
You say that one more time, James?
On other properties like this, we've had it where they had the carts, the trash can, wheelie out trash cans that they take out to the curb.
So they would be wheeling them down the driveway to the curb somewhere there.
Correct. And we would love to narrow the driveway too, but that's also a requirement from the city on how wide it has to be.
Is that with requirement, is that for emergency services? Do we know?
It's for two-way traffic,
Okay.
not from,
Correct. That's a good point.
What was that, Celia?
So
But
that,
it's a street, not a driveway.
James, sort of thinking out loud, that may be a little bit of an issue, you know, I don't know how they're going to not be in front of the neighboring properties when you have the trash cans.
yeah, that's something we could definitely consider, putting something in the back that,
It might be something that, if we were to grant a motion in favor of this request, somebody might have to work in,
that wouldn't be a problem.
yeah, we might have to work in something to do with that into the motion, because.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem, you know, covered area that one
And
trash
I
can
guess,
there.
in fairness, I mean, you're just getting into the design of this site, is that correct? Or do you have plans, or?
We have plans to a draftsman right now to get drawn up. We're waiting on some responses, I think, from the city on the elevations to make sure it's good. But we are ready to start construction, once we get a land disturbance permit.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Did you all explore having any sort of agreement with either of the two properties to the north and south to come off of their parking lots? I mean, you're sort of wedged in there, sort of an alternate.
No, we have not. The
Solution.
transitional buffers kind of limit us on where we can. We have to have that many trees, and we almost really need that space to fit the trees based off city requirements of how much space you have to have for the tree roots and everything. If we could get rid of the transitional buffers, then that would be an avenue we could explore, but with the tree requirements for the buffer zone, we're not able to accommodate all that.
Makes sense.
It makes sense from a technical standpoint, but not from a practical standpoint.
Again, we would love not to do the buffer and the fence, but it's a requirement that we have to do. I mean, I would definitely
Sure.
trade that off.
Sure. Okay. Well, do we have any other questions? Not more discussion, but any questions for him? Do you have anything else you want to add for anyone? We're going to move into more
Let
discussion.
me ask one more question,
Go right
because
ahead,
this
Doug.
is kind of a unique, with those fences being along the property line close to it, how far out do they come, like to Pulaski Street?
They would come up to our property line.
Okay. Okay.
I don't have the measurement from how far the road sits back from the property line, but it would go to the property
Well,
line.
they come, okay. They just hope, or they just come all the way out to the street, to the
The
property?
8-foot fence.
Yeah.
They're a little short, I believe.
City right away, right?
So, I mean, you do have a site visibility triangle that you can't bring it all the way out because of the site visibility. I mean, you have to be able to see, to pull out, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it'll come out past the structure a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we've heard the applicant testimony and some public input and then some rebuttal, so let's move into board discussion.
Could I start?
Absolutely.
All right, well, I'm trying really hard to stick with the criteria for
Yep.
variance requests.
Yep, very good.
And so I'm looking down, and I'm going, yeah, okay, fine, 1 and 2 and 3 are fine. But number 4, I don't see how this, applying these to things would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property because it could be single-family. So that's one, and we know that it could be used as a single-family property or 2 single-family properties. The authorization of the variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or the public good, and the character of the zoning district where the property is located will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. Well, it's kind of hard to say that 8 feet, an 8-foot fence on either side of these little tiny properties is not going to be a substantial detriment. And it's also, I mean, I think that the character of the zoning district would be harmed somewhat by this also. I mean, we're looking at we don't have a picture of the across the street people, but we had some testimony that those are, houses, single-family houses as well, and I'm a little concerned about that. I don't think that the variance is the minimum variance that would make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure, because as we said, the land could be used for a single-family residence with a normal-sized driveway just going down, and you would have to have no walls on either side, no fences on either side, because it wouldn't be requiring any transitional buffer. And I think arguably 7 also, it would be injurious to the neighborhood because I think, like I say, an 8-foot wall on 8-foot fence on either side is pretty scary looking, and it's sort of a big splot into the neighborhood. So I'm a little concerned about that, and I think that there might be some ways around it, but I don't see them right now, and it really does seem like this is kind of not fitting in with the character of the adjacent properties.
These lots have to be combined really to do much of anything because of their size. And, I mean, it's an odd place for a single-family dwelling.
You'd go down the access, you'd go down a little driveway.
I know it
And then
is.
you'd have 2 little houses in the back, say, something like that, side by side, or one big house, or,
But if you have one big house with a driveway leading into it, on one side, you've got that fairly large apartment complex. And on the other side, you've got a smaller apartment complex.
Townhomes.
Across the street, you've got whatever townhomes there are.
no, across the street, he said it was single family.
There's,
We heard, right, sir, that was single family, you live in single
I think
family.
they're connected.
I mean,
Yeah, they're townhomes.
regardless what they are, my point is, in theory, yes, certainly you could build a nice single-family dwelling and have a big yard, but I think that's going to be a tough sell. I mean, it would be expensive to buy this property, to combine these parcels where you can do that, and I just think you're going to have a hard time finding someone who wants to put their nice single-family home right here in the middle of all these apartment complexes.
Dick Harpootlian put his estate over there behind the tennis courts. I mean,
And,
people do it.
Again, and that's, that's one example, and I'm sure you could. I think my personal opinion is it's an odd place for a single-family dwelling. And if it's not a single-family dwelling, whoever develops it, or if anyone is able to develop it, you're gonna have to fight these same very issues that they're fighting, meaning
Well, I suppose the alternative would be for him to actually reach out to which it appears that he didn't do, to reach out to the next door neighbors on either side and see if he could cut a deal with them, and then you don't have that problem.
Well, we always recommend that. That's good, but you don't have to do that. I mean,
No,
it's
but you-
posted, they came.
But if the alternative is to have to put up 8-foot fence on either side, then our job is to say, whoa, that does seem detrimental. Either you talk to these people and see if you can do it so you don't have to put the 8-foot fence because you're no longer in a transitional situation, or admit that, in fact, putting 8-foot fence, I wouldn't want an 8-foot fence next to my house. And I'm on a slope, so it wouldn't be the end of the world.
I feel like there's a creative solution somewhere else that
Yeah.
this doesn't have to be the only solution. Like,
Well-
come back and ask a different question.
Okay, well, let's ask staff, is there any way that they can move forward with their development without an 8-foot fence? What do? They approach us for a variance for a fence height or something, or is that?
Yes, that would then have to be a variance to the landscaping standards, to the
variance.
buffer transition yard standards.
That seems like a much better choice.
Well, really, we
Yeah.
had both of the adjacent property owners, and I didn't hear anything from them about the fence.
I think they were confused about it.
Yeah, it's the first time I think, had seen it. I've seen some of the work that the applicant's done. They build good stuff, but the access is funky here, and the 2 8-foot fences are funky. I'm concerned about the trash. I think the development itself will be nice and be good for the neighborhood. It's just the access is, you're gonna have 2 curbs right beside each other.
Yeah, it
I
is.
feel like there is a better way to do it while still achieving the development, but
What do you think?
I don't know if does he own the property, or can applicant come back up here?
Sure.
If he hasn't closed already, it's closing in the next couple of days.
Okay,
I think he has already closed.
okay. I mean, I almost wonder if we ought to defer it up 30 days and let him meet with the neighbors. Try to come up with a better plan.
It seems to me that what you could be doing is having the deferral is a much better option, I would think, for all concerned, would be the variance on the landscaping standards, which is what they were saying. Instead of having to put up an ugly 8-foot fence, you don't put up an 8-foot fence, you do something else.
Is that an option to have a variance for
think that's what
the
they said.
transitional buffer?
I think that's what they said, but you're going to have to refile.
So
Be a different request.
what he's asking about would be, is there the potential that they could come back with a similar type request, but also include a variance for a fence or some sort of creative, better landscape buffer? Is that an option for the applicant?
I mean, yes, they could change the request, come back with a new
Yeah.
request for the buffer transition
How-
yard.
What would that look like? It'd be the similar request for what you're asking for, and then they would, in addition, ask for a variance for the buffer requirements, or could they work with you all to figure that out? Is that how that would?
Yeah, I think we
Okay.
could work with them on that. And I missed part of the conversation, sorry, but
That's
were
okay.
you discussing deferring it, or?
Possibly, I mean, it was mentioned, it was, and I guess the reason being is, it seems like a lot of people are hung up on the fence, so we're trying to figure out a way to not have that fence, basically.
Right.
It's the fence, it's the width, it's the.
And I think the
sort of-
the
it's
trash
sort of
is
what it-
valid too.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's not just the fence.
well, I mean, that's why we discuss it, and that's what board discussion's for, so,
Marcellus, you got any thoughts, man? Let's-
No, I was saying,
Yeah.
it wasn't just the fence.
Yeah, what do you think,
It's not a
Marcel?
requirement. It's not a requirement, but we always like to see community involvement
That's right.
with these projects.
It helps to avoid getting to a situation like here where it's sprung on people, that's right.
So, if, to come back, maybe to come back with a better plan. We've had situations where these cases were deferred, give them the opportunity to do some revision, maybe get the community involved.
So you would like to see them, as we mentioned, rework their request to address some of these issues and then come back before us?
Absolutely.
And Catherine, sounds like you would too.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I think the fence is a huge problem for me. I mean, it's just, and I
What do
think
you think,
there are workarounds
Yeah,
of various sorts.
I feel like the basic use of the property isn't wrong, but there's
Yeah.
something about the way that getting to it is just causing a lot of problems.
Right.
And if we could,
And just going back to my property law admittedly, what, in 1981, but thinking about, I mean, I think you do have the possibility of, those alleyways are still dedicated to public use, so they could be vacated, that there's a process to have that done in South Carolina. Contacting a good lawyer, there's a number of options that might prevent not having to have such a wide fence, a wide driveway, even if,
I mean, they don't.
That alleyway's
they don't-
too small.
They don't own that alleyway. I think.
no,
we're
I know they don't own, Gene, I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. I know they don't own the
Right.
alleyway. The public owns the alleyway. The public has the right-of-way to that alleyway, if I understand, looking at the map. I didn't look at, but the public owns that, and it would be possible, I think, to get in touch with, I don't know, Robert Anderson, whoever, streets, whatever, the city, and potentially develop that alley so that it is drivable. Because it's actually, I mean, we have alleyways, I mean, Elmwood Park, we got alleyways in University Hill.
There's not enough width in between Mr. Mark and Mr. James's property for a street.
No, I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. Okay, if you look at the plat, can I get the plat that's the city, a certain company that we know? Yeah, that, okay. I'm looking there, and you see, it says Morris Alley unopened.
Right.
And that runs south of the house, and then you come along, and you've got something, it's an alley. I mean, it must be
Well,
at,
it's not, on that plat, it's not showing the structure right there.
Yeah, that's where
I mean,
that
that alley
parking lot, I
is
think,
tight.
comes
It's
in.
smaller than that driveway.
well, I mean, I realize it's smaller than that, but it's an alley, it
But
must be
I
large
think
enough.
we need-
I don't know. And the other possibility would be the alleyway running to Richland Street.
But what I was saying earlier, Catherine, is we need to be careful with this. I mean, we have an applicant with a request in front of us for property they own, a specific request in front of us.
I understand.
You can bring up the point, which you did, but we don't need to stray too far into trying to
I understand.
tell them to acquire this alleyway, and I mean.
Oh, I understand. We don't necessarily need to try to fix it for them. I'm saying there are other options for them that they might wish to explore with competent professional, property lawyers or whatever. I'm just suggesting that there are other options. And one of the options that we do have, whether you like the idea or not, is that there are alternative uses for this property if they don't put a townhouse development there. There are potential alternative accesses. There are potential alternatives besides, really, really killing the two houses on either side, destroying the property values on either side with an 8-foot fence. And it may be that they modify the landscape, they have a landscaping modification variance instead that might mean that they don't have to put a fence up, which I think the neighbors probably would greatly prefer.
Okay.
So if I could just offer one thing, I just want to put this out there, that there is a mechanism for alternative compliance for landscaping that's approved at the staff level. And if the fence was the only issue here, there is the possibility that a condition could be placed regarding
good.
working with staff to come into alternative compliance, have an alternative compliance
That's
or a
what-
landscaping
yes.
plan
Well,
that
thank
would
you. That's
fit with that.
helpful.
That's very helpful.
Yeah,
And if we were not able to work through that, the applicant could then come and request a variance on the landscaping.
So,
I like that.
there's other things we've been talking about here that are in play, but with that being the case, it doesn't really sound like they need to reapply and request a variance for
No.
this fence situation.
Yeah, how would that look? Would we just almost
We would-
deny the one?
Sounds like we would work, somebody would carve
You
it
would
into
place
a
a
motion.
condition.
either-
A condition?
Condition.
If you
As a
were
con-
wanting to
as a
approve, you would
condition.
approve with that condition that we
That
go
had to
back
meet-
and meet
James,
the
do you need-
requirements for alternative compliance.
Hang on a second. Not you, Hope, sorry. Sorry, not you.
I know there's an alternative on that buffer,
Right.
but the other issue is that their driveway has to be 21 feet. We only have 22.4 feet, so that only leaves us less than a foot or so
Right.
on each side of our driveway to do a buffer. That's why we chose the fence, because it was the least invasive on the sides of what we had to work with. So we don't have enough room to do like a shrub wall or anything like that.
No, and I think what we're discussing is perhaps saying you don't have to put anything, that nothing, to me, the way I'm looking at it is nothing is better than an 8-foot wall, nothing.
Well, the city may have something to say about that too, remember?
Yeah, I mean, if the city's fine with that, we would be very happy. I would say,
You know the applicant would be fine with that.
Well,
that's a lot of
well, I
money.
understand that, but it sounded to me like, if I understood Hope correctly, it is an option that you might be willing to approve it without a fence. I mean, a driveway is just considerably more appealing. If I were in this, that
All right, well,
having a concrete driveway coming next to me
Well-
with no fence is more appealing than one with a
Catherine,
fence.
if you will, hang on, let's get Hope to tell us one more time what she said, so everyone's clear on
Yeah,
exactly what Hope
please.
said.
So
Hope.
instead of applying for a variance, it's called alternative compliance.
Okay,
So it's just a different mechanism for providing a somewhat alternative landscaping plan for a
okay, so,
project.
and I would envision that as the applicant works with the city to come up with a mutually agreeable plan. We don't know what it's going to look like. It's doesn't matter. If it's out of our hands, it'd be between the applicant and the city.
That's correct. The city staff makes the final decision on that,
Okay, so
on if that's granted or not.
So
go ahead, Sue.
that, it sounds like it's sort of dovetailing in, because that's, to go back to what is actually being asked in the variance is the width is part of it. And so,
No, the variance, as I understand it, is is to put a fence. You have to put they want to be, they want to add a parking space, which I don't think any of us have a problem with. And there's a problem with the fact that the width is not adequately wide to transition between other uses. Because there are single families on either side, they're having to request a very narrow width.
And because of the narrow
The
width, that
driveway or
triggers
paved
that-
area
that
has to be
triggers the
15
fence.
feet from a protected lot.
right.
Correct,
So I
yeah.
guess what I'm thinking through is when we're talking about sort of an alternative compliance, part of your concern was to have your buffer on that north side was why you couldn't connect to the other,
that was part of it, yes.
is there,
But I think the plan would have to still include some trees, I would think. For the alternate landscaping plan, we still have to probably do the trees.
Yeah, typically, the developer would present an alternative plan that would provide, some landscaping, of course.
Right.
And just not necessarily
right, but,
meet the code 100%.
if your
but-
driveway gets narrower, do you have room for more trees there that you don't have to, as Catherine said?
I don't think the problem is the width of the driveway is not something that we're trying to get changed. That's a requirement. It's that a driveway cannot be within 15 feet of a protected lot. So both of those single-family homes are considered protected lots. Our driveway can't be 15 feet. So if we're 15 feet from each, that's 30 feet. That's over the width of our
What they have.
property. Our property's only
Thank you.
22 feet
Yeah.
long,
Okay.
or wide, I'm sorry.
All right, thank you, James.
Thank
We'll
you.
continue this discussion. Okay, so as we move forward, so to me, that kind of tables the realistically deferring this for, deferring it for the fence reasons. I guess we could, the applicant could defer his request if he wanted to take time to meet with the adjoining property owners. But it's my opinion, I didn't hear a whole lot of negativity from the adjoining property owners. They testified in front of us, they had their chance.
Can he say one? He wants to raise it. He's trying to say.
Public input is closed. Public input is closed. We
I
can talk
did,
to
I did hear some concerns, and some of it was just that they were baffled by what was even going to go on.
Well,
so.
that may be the case, but there wasn't a strong negative reaction from the adjoining property owners, at least in my opinion. We can't defer it. They can defer it. At any time, they can walk up here and defer it, or we can continue to deliberate and make a motion and take a vote. I mean, I'm under the opinion that this works. I know it's not perfect, but I think it's an odd place, as I mentioned earlier, for anyone to construct a single-family dwelling. I think you're going to end up with something like this, or it's going to sit vacant, which that's not the worst thing in the world either. But if you have a development like this, anyone's going to have the same issue because of the extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the property, which is this lead-in width, and they do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. So As you can tell, my personal opinion is in favor of the request. Would be my
And I
opinion.
think that you do have options if you, as long as you had single family, you wouldn't have to have any transition whatsoever, and that there are people
But
who
that's
would
not
look
what
at.
they're here asking us to do,
Right, but the
mean-
point, but looking back to the criteria for variance requests.
right?
I believe that there are other potential uses for the property, going down, 4, 5, 6, that you could do, that would not require this, and that is substantial detriment to the properties on either side. And they haven't even had a chance to really process this very much, because they don't, they're not people like Board of Zoning Appeals members who are used to pulling up the packet and going through. They were just kind of wondering, they came here to see what was going on, and they really haven't had much of a chance to process it. But I'm sort of looking out there, and I see them kind of going, yeah, we are kind of having a bit of a problem with this. So I think that what might be a better alternative would be a motion conditioned upon approving it so long as the fence is not required by staff. That alternative compliance is worked through that would not require a fence, that's such that staff would not require by fence. A fence. I could try to articulate that, but it's kind of late in the day.
Well, yeah.
Do you want a motion? You want me to try a motion?
Thought we had established that, thanks to Hope bringing that to our attention, that any motion, a positive motion of approval would.
Let me see what I can do. Let me see what I can
have
do.
that. Okay?
I move that we approve, subject to an agreement, achieving an agreement with staff for alternative compliance that would not require the 8-foot fence on either side. And in case that is not possible, then they would either have to reapply or we would deny. I'm not sure how you could translate that. But
Are
in
we
any event.
specifically talking about only the drive portion, or are you also including the
I
back?
think
'Cause
only the
he was
drive.
having to use the,
Pardon me?
I think we should specify.
yeah.
Pardon me?
There's also some other 8-foot fences, and so are we saying?
We're talking about the 8-foot, the 8-foot buffer yard fence required for transitional yard, between transitional uses, as a transitional buffer between protected uses.
You're referring to the
Approximately
one-
right,
You're
yeah.
referring to the fences along the driveway.
Correct. On either side of the single-family uses.
Because that's what I was saying, is like, I feel like there's a break, like, when you're looking directly between the properties, the no fence is the better solution, but when you get to the backyard of the home.
Right, I see what
you
you're saying.
need to come back with,
Yes.
it doesn't mean it's an
So
8-foot.
only, okay, so I'm
but-
referring to only to the extent that there's an 8-foot tall wooden fence to be constructed running from, more or less, running from east to west along that section adjacent to the single-family houses.
Okay. All right, so we're still, this is still discussion, and we're getting there, and we're gonna craft
I think you have a motion now.
That is not our motion yet, okay? So,
It was a motion.
well, it's too vague. It took 2 minutes, so,
All right, I
so-
move
But
that.
hang on one second. John brought up a good point. We're still in discussion. John, please tell Catherine what you would like for her to work in her motion.
I still want to work in something on the trash, because they can't block the driveway with the trash.
Agreed.
So you got to be able to work the trash in.
We're just looking for.
That doesn't seem like a zoning thing.
I mean, yeah, maybe not.
That seems to be outside our purview.
You can make any condition that you would like, but do keep in mind that it has to be enforceable by staff, so, by zoning staff.
Well, yeah, let's leave the trash. I mean, that's not let's leave the trash out of it.
All right. Okay. Catherine?
I move that we approve only so long as staff is able to come up with alternative compliance plans, mutually satisfactory alternative compliance plans that do not require an 8-foot tall wooden fence to be constructed adjacent to, running east and west, adjacent to the single-family properties.
So for staff, I mean, can we even do a motion like that only so long as?
Why not?
Because if it's.
Good legal language.
I mean, if it's, what she's saying in her motion is, if we can't get rid of the fence,
Then motion, then we
I mean,
deny the
can we even
variance.
do that? I'm not so sure that we can do
Well,
that.
it would be approving with that condition.
That's
So-
what-
And if the condition fails, then you'd have to go back.
So
But
if
how- but I'm not-
so then if staff was not able to approve the
Right.
alternative compliance plan at the staff level,
Mm-hmm.
then they would have to come back and request a variance
Yes.
on that.
So that's an acceptable motion?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, thank you all very much.
Do we want to do one for the parking? Do we need to do one for the parking?
It's all in the same.
It's all in the same
It's the same, yeah, it's the same case.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other business?
No other business.
Okay, all right, very good. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, very good, y'all.